Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia is not evil incarnate, never was. Ukraine, on the other hand, I think has been the principal victim in all of this because the Ukrainian people were encouraged to see Russia through all the wrong lenses because it was in the interest of this minority to spur on the war in the hopes of weakening, if not destroying Russia. Right. Russia today is more powerful militarily and certainly economically than it's been since the 1980s. And that's largely as a consequence of a response to us and what we did in Ukraine.
This is Colonel Douglas MacGregor, a 28-year veteran of the U.S. Army who has previously served as the senior advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Colonel MacGregor has been an outstanding voice of reason on some of the most complicated geopolitical events around the world. I recently interviewed the colonel and asked him to share his thoughts on the future of Ukraine. In recent weeks, we've seen a massive shift of how US media is now presenting the Ukraine war. Just take a look at this article from the Wall Street Journal entitled, "It's Time to End Magical Thinking About Russia's Defeat." It argues that Vladimir Putin's self-confidence is soaring. The Ukrainian counteroffensive has not achieved the breakthrough that would give Kyiv a strong hand to negotiate, while the US has shifted its priorities to the Middle East and the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Bipartisan support for Ukraine in the US has been upended by polarization in Congress, and as we approach the 2024 US presidential election, the Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump, is seen as a pro-Putin ally and most certainly would not support additional funding for Ukraine. Many US politicians have now realized Russia is not losing in what has become a war of attrition. It appears that time is most certainly on Putin's side. In today's video, Colonel MacGregor explains how the US miscalculated Russia's invasion, how we overestimated our ability to build up Ukraine, and how this has backfired on America's own economy and ballooned our national debt to over $33 trillion. Today's interview is absolutely essential to watch, as Colonel MacGregor is a true American patriot who isn't afraid to say the truth out loud.
And our interventions have always distorted the normal dynamics in the region. And our argument for being there was, well, we're bringing everybody goodness and happiness and democracy and prosperity. And oh, by the way, our presence there is stabilizing and preventing conflict. Well, that's all nonsense. The opposite is being the case.
Now make sure you watch until the end of today's video, as I'll reveal a shocking piece of historical evidence that will completely change your perspective of the Ukraine war. But before I do, please give me a moment of your time, as I want to tell you a personal story about a video I recently watched that has helped me improve my health. Now next month I'm turning 40, and this is a huge milestone birthday. As a result, I've been pouring my time and my energy into researching products to improve my own health. I know most of you watching this channel are above the age of 40, so our health is our #1 priority right now. As a geopolitical YouTuber, I'm working all hours of the day, and my health is essential to me growing and sustaining this channel. You might have heard of something called leaky gut before, but some warning signs are weight gain, fatigue, digestive discomfort, and even achy joints and bones. What's worse is that gut health problems can be caused by certain healthy foods you've been told to eat, but can actually be harmful to your body. Dr. Gundry, who is a world-renowned cardiologist, developed an amazing video that shows you exactly which foods to eat and which to avoid, and how a blend of pre, pro, and postbiotics can improve your gut health. He has released a completely free and highly informative video showcasing the best strategies to improve your gut health. If you're interested in learning more, simply go to gutcleanseprotocol.com/Cyrus and watch Dr. Gundry's free video breaking down everything you need to know about gut health. Trust me, this video is amazing. I'll drop a link down in the description below. Colonel, I want to talk to you about Russia and Ukraine, because for the better part of 2 years, we have consistently heard, this is a, fight between good versus evil. We've tried to get the Americans on board, and really, we've really seen an incredible reversal here in the last couple of weeks. I think is fascinating. I want to start off with a video clip from Richard Haas. This is quite a stunning revelation that he made. I'm going to play that for everybody.
What I argued, therefore, is the United States needs to have some very direct conversations with Ukraine, with President Zelensky, talk about reducing their emphasis on liberating land, increasingly put all their emphasis on holding on to what they've got. Had 2 fighting seasons. The idea that 1 or 2 or 3 more years of this is going to result in success, I simply don't see it. Russia's on a war footing. They have access also to arms from North Korea and Iran. So I just think, any time in foreign policy, any time in life, there's a big gap between what you're trying to do and your ability to do it. You've either got to increase your means or lower your goals. And I think here the only realistic option as a tactical measure is to lower our goals.
Colonel, is that just amazing that we've now pivoted to lowering our goals? I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
No, I don't think there's anything amazing in it. He and a lot of people like him in Washington and New York City, really a minority of Americans, well-financed, unfortunately, with a lot of political influence, managed to drag this administration and Congress, who is always eager to join any conflict which they see as access to cash and money for their own purposes, into a war that should never have happened.
Right.
We have no real interest I'm talking about the American people. We have no interest in the destruction of Russia. That's absurd.
Right.
We've had actually pretty good relations with the Russians. And contrary to what people say, Russia is not a menacing, bad actor that is constantly interested in harming us. On the other hand, you can make a pretty good case that certainly since 2000, we have fallen into that category regarding Russia. So what's happened? We grossly miscalculated, underestimated the Russians. No one studied carefully the potential strength that Russia had or its ability to respond to an existential threat, which is what Ukraine became. Everyone overestimated our ability to exploit a proxy and stand up an army in the space of a few years that could stand up to the Russian military establishment. And, we've gone from, Putin has to go, his regime has to be destroyed. We need new leadership. We're going to, disintegrate Russia as a state to, we're going to harm it. We're going to weaken it so that it can't go anywhere else and threaten anybody else. Of course, Russia was no threat to Eastern Europe when this began. And if it is now, it certainly isn't something Russia wanted to be. It is because of what we've done.
Right.
Russia today is more powerful militarily and certainly economically than it's been since the 1980s. And that's largely as a consequence of a response to us and what we did in Ukraine. It's tragic. It's unfortunate. Now, the same group of people, I think, are trying to drag us into a major regional conflict in the Middle East. And barring that, I'm sure they'll do everything in their power to create conflict with China. Remember, you've got a lot of people that are heavily involved and invested in stupidity like this because they've made millions of dollars from it. Right. Either in think tanks or through investments with the defense industries or overseas foreign powers. The United States is at the end of a long and destructive period in our history that really began in the aftermath of 1991. We went through this during the Vietnam War. We recovered from that, came out of it with the goal of never doing it again. But then the consequences of having been victorious in 91 created the illusion of victory over everybody anytime we wanted with minimal loss. And that's brought us to this disastrous situation where we have a $33 trillion sovereign national debt that we can't possibly retire. We're having trouble just financing the government as it is. An economy that is in terrible conditions. It's shredded because we have voluntarily deported or exported our manufacturing base and the jobs with it. And a population that is really in shock from uncontrolled immigration, rising criminality, open borders, all these things together.
Right.
I don't think it can go on much longer, but people like Richard Haas and Cook Can and a host of others, Bill Kristol, just go down the list. They've all been pushing these bad policies, and now the proverbial chickens have come home to roost.
Yeah, that's a very good insight. And I think, how are we going to see this play out? Because I think what we've seen largely, here in the United States, most Americans are done supporting Ukraine. I mean, they don't want to see, like you just listed the plethora of issues that are facing our country. And I think we're really fed up saying, hey, we don't want to send another $100 billion to Ukraine for the effort of a stalemate for another 2 years. How does this end? How does this officially end? Is Ukraine going to be hang out left to dry? I mean, what is going to be the next step here?
I think the Ukrainian nation is destroyed. let's be frank.
Yeah.
You had 500,000 Ukrainian dead in the Ukrainian armed forces. I don't know how many civilians have been killed. I don't know exactly how many wounded, but I know that you're looking at 500,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers.
Right.
And to put this into perspective, in World War I, we Americans, for 110 days during 1918. And in the 110-day period, we sustained 318,000 casualties, of whom 110,000 died. That means, on average, 1,000 dead in every battle for every day that we fought.
Right.
You're looking at World War I scale of losses on the human side that we just can't even begin to comprehend it.
Yeah.
And, Ukraine was a much smaller nation than we were during the First World War. It is certainly smaller now. I don't know how many Ukrainians were really present in Ukraine when this began, because millions had fled long before the war began because of the corruption and lack of employment. So what is their population now down to? That is the population that lives under, theoretically, Ukrainian administration. 20 million, 19 million, 18 million, I don't know.
Right.
What's clear is that it's over because the United States government and the American media and financial committees have all changed the topic.
Right.
It sort of reminds me of Vietnam. What happened at the end of Vietnam? We left.
Right.
People stopped talking about it. It was over.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that Americans don't get, and most of the people that either work with us or against us don't understand. We are preeminently a maritime and aerospace power. We are not a land power anywhere in the world except in the Western Hemisphere. So what this means is that at the end of the day, if things don't go our way, we don't like what's happened, it doesn't suit us, we fly away, we sail away.
Yeah.
We're finished. But for the Chinese, for the Russians, for the Iranians, for the Arabs, for whomever, Africans, doesn't matter where you go, they live in the region.
Right.
They're stuck with it. And they're stuck with the consequences of our intervention.
Yeah.
And our interventions have always distorted the normal dynamics in the region. And our argument for being there was, well, we're bringing everybody goodness and happiness and democracy and prosperity. And oh, by the way, our presence there is stabilizing and preventing conflict. Well, that's all nonsense.
Right.
The opposite has been the case. So I think, Ukraine will stop coming up for discussion.
Yeah.
And we'll now talk almost exclusively about the Middle East. And of course, the Chinese threat to another pristine liberal democracy that sits offshore in Taiwan that must be defended at all costs. Again, nonsense.
Well, how does this look from the American perspective? I mean, is this a huge loss of face for us that we were pledging hundreds of billions of dollars? I mean, our stated goal when this was to drive Russia back to pre-invasion war lines, and that was very loud and clear. And does this really send a signal to our adversaries around the world? I mean, are they looking at America like, wow, you guys just completely messed that up? And I mean, does this mean that we're just not as strong as we thought we were?
Well, I think that's abundantly clear.
Yeah.
We are not the nation we were 30 years ago. Far from it. We don't have the societal cohesion. We don't have the forces that we had 30 years ago. And our forces have not kept pace with the changes in the international environment. Our way of looking at the world is stuck in about 1992.
Right.
No one seems to understand that the world itself over the last 30 years has changed profoundly. It's another problem.
Right.
Americans have lived in a world where they thought of themselves as being at the center of it. We're not.
Right.
We're a great power, and we certainly have a role to play, but the notion that we are the center of the universe is about as lunatic as the ancient Chinese version of seeing themselves at the center of the world and everyone else beyond them as a barbarian.
Right.
No, that was never realistic either.
Right.
And you say, well, do Americans realize this? No, Americans, overwhelming majority, pay very little attention to what happens beyond their borders.
Absolutely.
In fact, they don't even pay attention to what's happening in Washington or inside their own country, as long as they get their, retirement checks, their pension checks, or their paychecks from whatever job they have, or as long as they can drive a car that they own and they have a house or whatever. In other words, as long as their standard of living is not demonstrably affected, they tend to ignore things.
It's true. Yeah.
So if you go back through Chinese history, when did you get dynastic change in China? When people couldn't eat.
Right.
You don't need to be a genius to figure these things out. So when did the French Revolution break out in 1789, when the population could not afford to buy bread?
Right.
So these are simply facts. So Americans, no, I don't think Americans have figured it out.
Yeah.
And remember, the Americans want to believe that wherever we go, we do good things, and that our soldiers, sailors, and airmen are all great people, and they're being used to do good things.
Yeah, that's certainly the message that's being preached here. I mean, but the results don't show that. Everyone, as we conclude today's video, I have one more powerful video clip to share with you that honestly changes everything we know about the Ukraine war. In a new interview, David Arakahamia, a Ukrainian government official who served under Zelensky and led the Ukrainian delegation at peace talks with the Russians a few weeks into the war, reveals two shocking truths. The first is that Russia's principal goal for the war wasn't to invade the whole of Ukraine, but to force Ukraine to become a neutral country that would not be part of NATO. For 2 years, our media has told us that Ukraine's neutrality wasn't the main issue, and that Putin aspired to overtake all of Ukraine. This simply isn't true, and this Ukrainian official just confirmed it. Second, he also reveals that the UK's Boris Johnson came to Kyiv and told the Ukrainians, "We will not sign anything at all with them, let's just fight." Proving it was in fact the West that killed a potential peace deal. Today, Ukraine can only dream about those conditions it was offered in early 2022. Here is the full clip from the Ukrainian government official explaining what actually happened. As always, thank you for your support. Make sure you click on the link in the description to watch that free video from Dr. Gundry to improve your health, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.